The permit process really begins before a lot of people even think. To even get a building permit, you'll have a blank piece of land. And a blank piece of land requires a number of things. It requires what we call our platting process. And so a developer typically would improve this land, get approval from council for the use if there was a change in use, cut in roads, put in roads, have inspections of them, come up with a very detailed platting plan. And that would go through our Public Works Department, where they would ultimately approve the plat plan, make inspections of all the public improvements, be it the new drains and new sewers and new roads, and essentially get all that approved and worked out before a building permit would even be thought of. So once the building has gone through platting, the applicant is ready to apply for a building permit. They bring us their plans. They would go through a number of reviews, a planning review, a public works review, and again, our building review, as we call it. Once those reviews are done, completed, approved, fees are paid for, it'd be at that point we go from this pre-permitting phase to now the build or inspection phase of a job. When they first start building, probably the first stage generally we think of is what we call the ground phase of a construction project. The ground phase is generally everything under a slab, if you will. It could be plumbing below the slab or around the site. It could be getting your initial grading done around the site, and then the pouring foundations, and then pouring the slab itself. We have an inspection team who looks at all components of that. They're looking at grading for sites before they're done. They're looking at the plumbing to make sure it's in compliance, looking structurally at foundations and slabs to make sure they're built well, safe, and in accordance with the code. So once the ground phase is all done, we kind of move into this part of the job we call the rough in part of the job. And so the rough in is generally thought of as you have a structure built, it's got 4 walls and a dried in roof. And now they're installing all the structural studs or walls. They're putting in ceilings and beams and roof components. So we're looking at all that framing for structural considerations, but we're also looking at electrical. So all the wiring is going to be put in the walls, all the plumbing, all the heat and air that's going in the walls and the ceiling. We're looking at all these series of work that's about to be concealed with sheetrock. So we do a very thorough inspection of, again, all this work in the rough stage. In the city of Norman, we even actually view insulation that goes in the walls before they sheetrock. So once we've concluded all those items of interest, we give them approvals, and at that point they can then start sheetrocking, or install gypboard as we call it, and then they're able to conclude that rough in phase of work. So once the rough in phase is done, normally there's a pretty good little delay before we come back to the work. They've hung up the wall board, they're going to paint the walls, put in trim, put in baseboards, a lot of aesthetic items, floor coverings, a lot of items of interest, but not necessarily critical to the inspection process. So there's usually a pretty good little lag there, but they'll get to a point, and we'll call it the final stage of inspections, where they have now came back and the electrician has done all the final wiring, put the plugs in, put his lights in. The heat and air contractor has installed all his equipment, got it live, got it controlled wiring, set everything, and is fully operational. The plumber will come back, set fixtures, install water heaters, get everything operational, and then and that will really start to kick off what we call our final inspections. So once those trades are done with those various items of interest, we'll come back, we'll look at them in their final stage, and then we'll conclude it all with what we call a building final inspection, which is kind of our one last look over everything, where we're kind of looking for general compliance across the board, looking for insulation in the ceiling and the attic spaces, make sure it's correct, looking at life safety items like stairs and ramps and handrails, and a number of other items as well. And so once they've concluded these final inspections, that generally takes the permit to its near conclusion, and we issue, once they're done, what we refer to as a certificate of occupancy. Building codes are important to the public. They help ensure that new buildings are safe, built in compliance with the codes, are going to be long-lasting, sustainable, and energy efficient, and also consider features like accessibility as well. We help establish that minimum standard that we would expect throughout the community. And New buildings are also very important because we think of buildings as long-lasting structures. A lot of people think this is my house. Of course it is your house, but more importantly than that, that house will probably outlive you. Think of the buildings around this town. We have some that are hundreds of years old, and if you go up and travel and see the world, there's buildings that are 1,000 years old. So we believe we're helping create a world for tomorrow for these buildings to last and be safe and be functional for a long time.